So I'm sitting here thinking that I had this incredible intro before we started that I had rolling around in my brain.
We can't wait to hear
and
it.
then you and I started talking about something else and it's completely gone.
So it's sort of my fault in a way.
It is. Well, it's not really. See, there you go apologizing
I
again,
didn't
Joe.
apologize
Stop
this time.
apologizing.
I was taking pride in
You were
the
getting
fact.
close, though.
I was taking pride in the fact that I can draw you off your topic ideas.
Yeah, you did, and you did a very good job of that.
I'm adept at that.
You really are. So, hey, John, how are you today?
Hi, who is this? You're
This
Nick.
is Sir Quacks-a-Lot.
You are not Sir Quacks-a-Lot. I know Sir Quacks-a-Lot.
No.
You, sir, are no Sir Quacks-a-Lot.
No, but you're Sir Quad-a-Lot.
I am
Quad-a-lot.
Quad-a-lot, yeah.
You're Quad-a-lot.
I am.
Yeah.
Wow. And if they have not hung up yet, they will.
Very soon. Very soon.
See you guys later.
So, yeah, exactly. John, I just got back from a trip with my wife and daughter in Chicago. I took a few days off.
Chicago. Is it still a toddling town?
It is a toddling town. And I actually posted a few things on our Instagram account about our trip. And one of the things, there are a couple of things that I want to bring up. And the reason I'm bringing up Chicago, there are a few reasons, but one main is because what you got me off topic about was the fact that you want to talk about axe throwing. My first introduction to axe throwing was a television show that was based in Chicago that I watched. I'm a big fan of. So I don't really want to get into that. But you brought it up, so I want to talk about Chicago.
Yes.
And I want to talk specifically about Mr. J's. I think I sent you something about that. Mr. J's Hot Dogs, which is it's a Chicago dog place.
So
that's what they're famous
for. That's where you were. That's where the picture was taken?
No.
Yeah.
So some of you might have noticed that there was an original picture that I posted with the dialogue about PoddiMouths taking over Chicago, and it was a picture of myself and my daughter, and I happened to be wearing my PoddiMouths shirt, and that's why I said PoddiMouths take over Chicago.
Yes.
I didn't notice until after I posted what the sign behind me said, and my daughter and I were. It was a handicap sign.
It was.
I didn't notice it was there, but my daughter and I were making funny faces, and there was an arrow pointing right to us. So I didn't think it was necessarily appropriate enough without an explanation to keep up. So I actually quickly took that down and put a different picture of my daughter and I walking down a parking lot with a suitcase. So that was kind of the origins of that. But yes, that was the same day. We were actually on our way back from Mr. J's. We went to a couple of different places. So what we actually did is we took a tour, and the tour was pretty incredible. And it was I'm going to pull up the name of the tour.
Was it a walking tour, or was it like Segway?
It was a walking tour. So. Okay. It was a walking tour, and we actually there were two of them in one. My wife booked it on our TripAdvisor.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a separate company from that I had to look up, and they're only a few months old in Chicago. But if anyone's in Chicago, I would highly recommend. They're big all over the world. It's a huge touring company, but they just started in Chicago. Highly recommend it. And what they did, so we started out as a walking tour, and it was mostly about architecture and the history of Chicago, which was really interesting. And we walked around and we looked at things that we knew very little about, or at least the origins. For example, the Marshall Field building and the Marshall Field's warehouse, the Riverwalk itself, the Trump Tower, things like that. So it was really, really neat.
Cool.
And then after that, it moved into more of a food tour. And the food tour took us to Mr. J's, for one, for a Chicago dog. Then they took us to another place, and unfortunately I forgot the name of that place. But it was another type of Chicago dog with a few different ingredients, not very far off the Chicago dog, because you really can't do much to change the Chicago dog. The biggest difference was the shape of the pickle.
Was it Portillo's?
I'm getting there.
Oh, well,
it wasn't Portillo's. I'm getting there, John. We've got like 45 minutes to fill, so chill. So we went to this other place that I forgot. It was just a few blocks away from Mr. J's. And the biggest difference there was the shape of the pickle, and it was the sesame seed bun. that they used, and I think and their relish was a little bit different. So everyone in the group pretty much agreed that Mr. J's by far was the better hot dog,
Okay.
but Mr. J's doesn't have the same bun, so they don't have not a sesame seed bun, but it's the black seeds, poppy seeds, or
Opposite.
whatever the
Uh-huh.
seeds that they put on the bun. They didn't have those, and but the relish was a little bit sweeter, and the peppers were a little bit spicier, and the pickle was a little bit easier to
I
eat.
like all of those
Whereas
things.
this other place had the better bun, and the pickle, even though it was a little bit harder to eat, was a spear, which I like spears better. So those two things were good, but the relish wasn't quite as sweet, and it wasn't quite as spicy.
Okay.
So it was kind of a give and take, but we voted Mr. J's. So for Mr. J's, then we walked down to the Chicago Due, which is the brother of the person who owns the Uno Pizzeria.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's Uno, which is number one,
Yeah.
and Due. They're basically the same place, and they said that it's basically the same place, but it's a cool history because they're open 10 years later.
Hmm.
But it just gives them more seats. And we had a deep dish pizza, which was interesting. I've had deep dish before, but this was definitely a very interesting deep dish. My wife has never had a true Chicago deep dish, and she was fascinated by the
Oh,
dough.
she has it.
No,
Okay. So was it? It's so
it's
heavy.
so heavy. We barely finished one piece,
Yes.
and that was after having two hot
Yeah.
dogs. So
Well, I was going to say because you go, and then right from there we went to have
yep.
dessert,
Oh,
and then
not
a
yet, not yet,
steak,
not dessert yet.
and then
But
chicken.
you're close. So then we walked from there down to another place, and I'm sorry, guys, I'm forgetting all these names, but this is a very famous place. Like a lot of chefs go there. Anthony Bourdain's been there. They did a Man versus Food episode there, but it was the traditional uh, not cheesesteak. What is it called? It's Portillo's is famous for it too. You got the shaved beef, the cheese,
Oh, it's Italian
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 beef.
beef.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
it was a really good Italian beef place, a famous Italian
Hmm.
beef place. That thing just blew my socks off. I loved every ounce of that little piece. And there, granted, I'm saying we're eating these things, but we're only eating small bites. So it was half a hot dog here, half a hot dog at the other, a
Because I
third
was
of
going
a
to say
sandwich,
it would turn it from a walking tour to a
rolling
rolling
tour,
tour at some
exactly.
point. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we had the Italian beef there. Then John, we went to your favorites. We went to the original Portillo's
Portillo's.
for some chocolate
And
cake.
you didn't like it as well.
No, we just had
Oh,
chocolate
for some
cake.
what?
Chocolate cake. They have a very famous recipe for their chocolate cake. They use mayonnaise in their chocolate
I
cake.
guess I did not know
I
that.
didn't know that
Interesting.
either. And it was a
And
phenomenal
how
chocolate
was it?
cake.
Okay.
It was very, very good. But I've been to Portillo's many times because
Okay.
Portillo's is now a bigger chain. So they're in Indianapolis, they're in other places in Indiana. Of course, there's one close
Wisconsin.
to
They
our
even have
office in
one in
Chicago.
Wisconsin now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they even have one in Wisconsin. They were telling me that.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
kind of our food tour, and that was a lot of fun. And of course, we went to a lot of other places on our own and ate. And I think I also posted on Instagram about our Blackstone experience. Never again,
Blackstone Hotel.
Blackstone Hotel, which is very historic, built by the Drake
Ah,
brothers, and it's right across from Grant Park, which we
yes,
didn't
it
know
is.
at the time when
I've
we were
stayed there,
booking.
by the way.
You have
Yeah.
stayed there. You've told me about that.
Yes.
It's great,
Yeah.
but a lot of presidents have stayed there. When President Kennedy found out about the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was actually sitting in the Blackstone Hotel in the presidential suite,
Huh.
and
Yes.
I think there's 14 presidents that have stayed there at any given time. So it's a very famous historic hotel, and it's a
Did
phenomenal
I?
place.
I'm sure if I told you about the Blackstone, I told you the fact that that is the site, the original site of the term smoke-filled room.
Yeah, they actually have a room there. They still call it the smoke-filled room. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. We didn't
Cool.
get to see that. That was the only room we didn't get to. No, I didn't.
Well, yeah, it's smoky.
Yeah, right. But we
You
did check
can't
out.
see anything.
So you stayed at the 21C here in Nashville, and that was an art museum. But the
Yes.
Blackstone is also an art museum, so you can actually go to every single floor and see a different artist. And they also have a couple of galleries in there as well. So it was a
Hmm.
really neat place. But the one thing that we didn't know before we booked the trip, and the one thing that frustrated us when we got there, it wasn't horrible, but we had to work around it a little bit, was the Lollapalooza festival was there
Oh,
right across the road. We didn't get to go into Grant Park really all that much. We did get to go to the Bean or the Cloud statue,
yeah.
and we
Yeah.
did get to go to the water pad, but we didn't really get to go see some of the other stuff inside of Grant Park
That's
because
too
of
bad.
Lollapalooza.
It
Um,
seems like when you make reservations, that they would make that known, you know?
you'd think so, and it was on their website, but it was really hidden. So I had to do
Oh,
some digging into the website to find it, and
yep.
that would have been nice. Yeah. Instead, they did send out information about it, but it was the day before we checked in. So,
Hmm.
it was partially my fault. I should have done more research on things going on beforehand, but I didn't.
I can't believe you're saying that because anyone who does half the research that you do knows everything there is to know.
Well,
Yeah, because you are I mean, you are very thirsty for information.
I am, but
You're
I've been to
very detail
Chicago.
oriented.
I've been to Chicago so much. I mean, the
True.
our corporate office is in Chicago, and then the client that we work for, their region for the region that
Mm,
I work in is also located in Chicago. So I'm in Chicago quite a bit. And we
mm.
also have friends that live in Chicago, coworkers that live in Chicago as well. So
Yep.
I didn't feel like I needed to really do much research because Chicago to me is Chicago. How many times have I
You were
been lied?
wrong. You were
I was
wrong.
absolutely wrong. I've just proved myself wrong. But it was a lot of fun. So besides Lollapalooza, the only downside, and this is the only thing that pissed me off, and it's going to kind of contradict something I said from a previous episode when we were talking about tourists. We were the tourists there. Not, I wasn't so much as my wife and my
Oh,
daughter, who was also with
right.
us. We went
Yep.
to the Field Museum, which was phenomenal. My daughter just dug it. We couldn't get her out of that place.
Oh,
It was
good.
fantastic. It
Wonderful.
surprised us because I didn't. My daughter has not ever been really a museum person. We went
Hmm.
to the Field Museum, and then we decided to walk the waterfront back.
Yeah.
Well, my wife didn't realize when she asked if we could walk the waterfront that Lollapalooza had still had everything closed. The festival was over, but they still had all of the barricades up. We're
Uh,
walking down all the way to the other side of the park because if for anyone that knows, the Blackstone is kind of on the southern side, not quite halfway down on the southern side. We walked all the way to the north side of the park and then crossed over and then had to come back. And of course, we were in a hurry because we had to make dinner reservations
uh,
at the Bernhof, very famous old German restaurant. Highly recommend. It's been around since like 1918. It was very very good. Anyway, we walked all the way down, and because they had all of these barricades up, we are forced to walk on the bike path. And we walk, and it wasn't a problem. Most people are going around us, stuff like that. We get to an intersection that's being managed by a police officer because there's so many people because the park is blocked off and all the barricades
yeah.
up, and we're not in a very good spot because we're kind of corralled into an area. Well, I'm out of the way. My wife is kind of out of the way. She's still kind of in the middle of the bike path. But my daughter, it's the first time we'd let her hand go pretty much the whole trip because we're
Oh.
we're we're not helicopter parents, but we are drone parents. So, we want to make sure
Mhm.
that she's safe, especially when she's off in La La Land and playing with one of the toys that she got at the Field Museum. This asshole comes riding his bike and he's like, "Excuse me, move out of the way." And then looks right at Peyton and starts yelling at her, going, "Of course, you're standing right in the middle of the bike path." I'm like, you know what? Okay, yell at me. That's one thing. I'm 40 years old. If I'm doing something wrong, fine. I can take it. My wife, same thing. If she's more of a tourist, you could say, okay, maybe stop being such a jerk. But yeah, she'd still be old enough to take it and move out of the way. But to yell at an 8-year old who has no idea where she is and what she's doing, and she's off in her own
Yeah.
world, what a jerk. I mean, who it has to be such an asshole that they're going to yell at an 8-year old for standing somewhere?
Did you call him out?
No, but it was the first time in my life that I was ready to go pop a bear on somebody. If he would have stopped his
Yeah.
bike, I would have. And the cop even, I looked back at the cop. The cop had her was staring right at the biker with her hands in the air, going with the just kind of going or nodding her head back and forth, going, "What the hell are you doing? Can't you not see
Wow.
all of these barricades here? Can't you see that these people are trying to cross the road and trying to stay out of everyone's way? And what the hell are you doing yelling at a little kid? What a prick!" And I hope he's a
But
listener,
she
and I
didn't
hope
say anything.
I calling him out right now. I wanted to look at him and say, "Why don't you come to my city during CMA Fest and try to cross the road somewhere where everything's blocked off and ride your bike and see how you feel, dickhead. But that's my biggest complaint. So I'm done venting. All in all, it was a phenomenal
I
trip. We
don't
had a lot
think
of fun.
you are. I don't think you're done. I may prompt you to vent a little more,
You could
but
try.
we'll see how the how the episode
That was really
goes.
that was the only bad side. We had a very good trip, and a lot of times when I travel to Chicago, there's always something that makes the trip not so fun. But this time we had a lot of fun. That was the only
So
downside.
let's just use this as a teaching moment then. If one person can spoil somebody's day slash weekend slash trip, if you're in business, you have to know that anybody that works for you can mess with, and really it's a flip side. It's either they can build on the relationship or they chip away at the relationship. And one person can make all the difference.
Oh,
That is
absolutely.
such a big deal that most people do not recognize. And that's why we tell our clients that if you don't have happy employees, you'll never truly have happy customers.
That's so
And I
true.
really think that's true. I think because just that one person that's not happy, and it could be a very small, what you might deem to be a menial position, that person could have as much influence as the president of the company. And
100%.
it's just such a big deal. And what a shame to have one person like that who, for whatever reason, who knows what's going on in his world. And frankly, who cares? You don't do that stuff to a young kid.
Right.
And it's just that can negatively impact the entire visit.
Absolutely.
So it's too bad. It really does suck.
A very good teaching moment there, John. Nicely done.
Thank you. I couldn't help myself.
If this we hadn't planned on this being an educational podcast, but now we are poddicators.
I think I was going to have potty taters for dinner tonight, but now
Nice.
I
Very
don't know
nice.
if I'm going to.
Well, but let's jump into the axe throwing. But before I do that, the name of the company is Urban Adventures,
Oh,
Intrepid
good.
Urban Adventures. They're phenomenal. Again, this one was new, so we only had a group of 3 or 4. Met some
How long?
fantastic people.
How long was the tour?
Well, the first tour was 2 hours, the architecture tour, and then the food tour was about 3 hours. So all told, it was a 5-hour tour. Peyton did
Fun.
fantastic on that tour, by the way. I was very surprised at that too. She was fantastic the whole weekend.
Did she enjoy it?
She enjoyed it very much. She wants to go
Wonderful.
back. And I said, "Oh, do you want to live in Chicago?" She's like, "No."
That's good. There's
Yep.
a distinction between enjoying a city and wanting to move there.
Yes. Yeah. She said it was too busy for her, but she did have a blast, and we spent a lot of time on the L, going back and
Yeah.
forth to places. We did go see the American Girl doll because a lot of people said you need to go to the American Girl doll store, and she had a blast there too. So we had all
Yeah,
in
but
all, it was a lot of fun.
did you have fun at the American Girl store?
I had a blast until I had to pull out the credit card.
I was gonna say because that's gonna be really cheap. I bet.
It was less expensive than I had expected, but it was a lot of fun.
Oh, well, then
Mainly
you
because
managed your expectations
yeah.
well.
Well, the easiest thing to do was to tell my daughter a lot of the stuff we can't take with us because we can't take it back on the airplane.
You're
So
so lucky.
yeah, it was very small. Everything that we bought was very small.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a good time, and I would highly recommend the Intrepid Urban Adventures. They were really really good.
Cool.
Something I had never done while I was there that I am impressed with, and actually the next time I go, I think I want to spend more time. I have not spent time on the Riverwalk, and there was some really fun things to do on the Riverwalk. A lot of really cool little restaurants and stuff like that. So I would recommend
Did
that
you
as
do
well.
Navy Pier?
Of course, have to do Navy Pier. I
I
was
agree. I
hoping
think it's
not,
cool.
but again, my wife and daughter had never been there, so might as
Yeah,
well
you have to do all those
save at least one of your paychecks to go. But it was good.
things. Yes, for sure. That's good. And did you have? And I'm pretty sure I asked you about this before too. Did you have the bacon wrapped dates at the Blackstone?
Yes.
Did you?
Did.
Good.
Yes, they're
Oh,
phenomenal.
and they are amazing. One of
Yeah,
my
it was.
favorite things in the world is their bacon wrap dates.
And for anyone that stays there, the 1600 Club is the concierge club. So if you can go in there, anyone can go in there, I think. But it's mainly for people that have status with their Marriott rewards. So we went down to the 1600 Club, but of course, it was closed for Lollapalooza,
Oh,
except for the last day. So the last day, and a lot because that's where a lot of the police would go and take their breaks. Since it was a sponsoring event, they opened up the 1600 Club for the police to cool off and get some food and stuff like that. So
liquor.
yeah, they didn't
Get
have any.
liquored up.
Nope, they didn't have any down there because we had planned to go down there and just have a cocktail and some hors d'oeuvres the day it was open, and they still, because Lollapalooza was still open, they didn't have any down there.
Well, I mean, if it's a place for the cops to go, they probably.
They probably brought their own,
I
right?
was being
Yeah, I
facetious, of
know.
course.
I was saying they probably brought their own.
Wow.
Yeah,
Very nice. Okay, they're going to look for you next time in Chicago.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm sure.
A lot of very
Okay.
young police officers too. I was
Oh,
kind of
really?
impressed. Yeah, and very diverse. And I don't mean just ethnicities. I was also talking about gender. A lot of female cops, a lot
Hmm.
of male cops, very young. Like I'm talking
Hmm.
20s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so very impressed.
Well, that's cool. That I think that's a good sign or a good thing. I know Chicago has a lot of highly publicized downside, and having lived in the suburbs there for about 8 years, um, it's really historically, at least, it's been a delightful city, and I
Oh,
enjoy it. I enjoy visiting, but just like any big city, there are areas that you don't want to necessarily go. That you would avoid, perhaps, is
yeah.
a fair way to say it.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some that are just delightful. So you don't want to forego the one to deal with the other. I
Right.
guess is.
And the homeless population there too is it's the one city I've been in recently where I haven't seen a dramatic increase, but you will see quite a bit of homeless when you are there, and they do panhandle. So that's something else to be weary of when you're there.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's is that something that's increasing nationwide,
I'm
or is
not
it
sure. I know
just
it's increased.
in
It seems to
certain
be
areas?
increasing here in Nashville. I've seen a lot more homeless here than I have in the 12 years that I've lived here. So in the
It
last year
just
or
seems
two,
like with such low unemployment that it's unusual,
it
or
is.
it's counterintuitive that you would see more. And maybe it's just because it's more visible. I don't know, but
It
I
could
mean,
be.
you've heard California too the same way, and all that goes with it, especially in places like San Francisco and LA,
And Seattle too. Seattle has a large homeless population, but I don't know if
for sure.
they are increasing or decreasing whatsoever. But that was one thing that surprised me about that city in particular was the number of homeless.
Well, in Chicago too, especially when you consider the winter.
Right. Oh
So
yeah.
I don't know if it's common in that community to go to other cities, or
I don't I don't
whatever the
know.
case
That's a
may be.
really good question. But Chicago itself has a tunnel system that runs under much of the city, very similar to how Minneapolis has the skyways, has a skyway
Hmm.
system. There's a tunnel system that leads from building to building. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people find their way there during the winter because you do see a lot of homeless in the rail tunnels as well.
Well, and it is called the Windy City, but not because of the wind coming off Lake Michigan. Do you know
Okay,
why it's called the Windy City?
I do not.
Um, from years ago, and probably the early 19th or early 1900s, that it was because of the hot air spewed by all the politicians.
Oh, really?
That is the truth.
I believe that. I for some
But
reason I want to say I've heard that somewhere now that you say that, but I don't.
yeah,
Yeah, I never think of it that way.
no, especially when you're walking on Michigan Avenue and getting blown over
Right.
because
Yes.
of the wind coming off, and you
Yes.
think that's obviously what it is. But and because of the skyscrapers too, it, you get that wind tunnel effect sometimes, and
Oh
oh my
yeah.
gosh, yeah, it can really blow you around. And in the winter, you pay particular attention to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, baby.
One thing I also learned that I didn't actually know was that after the fire, they actually engineered the Chicago River to flow the opposite direction. So instead of all of the sewage and bad stuff that they were pumping into the river flowing into Lake Michigan, now it flows down to the Mississippi.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, I never knew that. I thought that was a unique thing. So.
That is kind of unique. And so, how does? I guess I'd need to know more about that since the Mississippi is on the other side of the state.
Well, it's the river and the canal system.
Hmm.
I don't know how they just dredged it out
Interesting.
so the water would start flowing the opposite direction.
Interesting. You are a font of useful information this time.
I wouldn't call that useful. It's just
Well,
very
it depends.
interesting.
If you're going to Chicago, it's useful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and some of our listeners live in Chicago, so hopefully they could correct all of the things that our tour guides might have said mistakenly. But both tour guides grew up in the Chicagoland area. One of them actually grew up in the city.
Is that right?
Yep.
That's very interesting, and it's kind of an interesting setup in Chicago too, because there has been, you hear about rush hour in some cities where people, vehicles and whatnot rushing into the city and then rushing
I
out.
thought that's when you just sit on Rush Street for an hour.
There's that too. Very good, nicely done.
Thank
And in Chicago, for many years, there has not been a real rush hour because the traffic that goes out to the suburbs is as heavy as the traffic that comes into the city, and vice versa.
Oh yeah.
Later
Yep.
in the day, big loft presence downtown Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting how the dynamic has changed, maybe cyclically, for the city.
So something interesting that I found is just for fun, whenever we travel to different cities, and I do it by myself and I do it with my wife, we just look to see what it would cost to live in a city. And Chicago's always been one of those cities where we go, oh, it's just so expensive to live there, and it's this and it's that.
Yeah.
Living in Nashville for 12 years, we thought until recently that we lived in a fairly inexpensive city. But of course, we know Nashville has been growing quite a bit. It's been growing leaps and bounds. We've talked about that in previous episodes. So what we did, we have a 3-bedroom house with 2.5 baths. So that's kind of what we look for in other cities, just to compare. Granted, we didn't look out in the suburbs. We looked specifically in the city, and we looked at condos and apartments just to see what we could afford if we wanted to ever make that move. And to be honest, we found a lot, 3 and 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, very nice finished places, apartments in nice parts of town that were less than our house. So I don't know. Now, granted, I'm sure insurance is, because it's Illinois, insurance is, I'm sorry, taxes are probably a lot higher.
Yeah.
And, there are other living costs that we don't have here that would be rolled into that. So maybe the cost of living would be a little bit higher. But I was still, I don't know if it's Chicago's prices coming down because people are starting to move more to the coasts again, or if Nashville is just getting so expensive to live in that we are starting to compare to that upper tier city.
Sure. What was the square footage of? I mean, was that comparable as well?
No, the square footage was a little bit smaller. So our house is about 2,800 square feet, and most of these places were 2,200 square feet.
Okay, but still, that's
not small.
Not
small at all.
Right.
Awesome. And if we wanted to get even nicer, higher end, we could go down to 2 bedrooms and fewer square footage for the same price. And it was just comparable. It was impressive, I would say.
Awesome.
I still think Chicago all out would be more expensive to live in than Nashville, but still, just comparing house to house, I was shocked.
Well, that's cool. And I think that's probably part of the reason why you're seeing that influx of people moving to the city,
right?
And really less the urban sprawl that was going on. Although I don't know if that's changing. I know St. Charles and Naperville and places to the west, the western suburbs have been growing exponentially for many years.
Yes. And I have friends that live there or have lived there too. It lived in the suburbs, who say it's just unbelievably expensive.
Well, it's yes, although it's certainly not San Francisco or Miami Beach or LA.
Right. Exactly. You get people that move from those places to Chicago, they're probably thinking it's a wonderful place. It's cheap
until January.
until January. Yeah, then they go, what the hell did I do?
Yes, it does tend to get a little chilly.
Yep.
In the
And
winter.
I do say that the people that I know that live in Chicago, unless they're from Chicago, which I do have a couple friends that are from Chicago, and they never know a difference because they've never lived anywhere else. But the ones
Sure.
that I talked to that were saying, "Oh, it's so ungodly expensive," lived in Missouri. So, and some of them
Ah,
are back in Missouri, so I can understand that. It's more expensive to live in Nashville than it is to live in St. Louis right now. So,
of course. Interesting.
yeah,
Well, that's cool. It sounds like you had a very nice trip, and I think that's a really good call for you guys. Other than the flight issue, I take it you flew out of O'Hare, right?
yeah. Flying in and out of O'Hare, I've never had a problem, really, with that airport. The biggest thing, the last couple of times that I've flown in, though, there's been something, and both times on the Nashville end, flying into Nashville. The last
Oh,
time there was something wonky on the runway, so we had to do a fly around. We had to go back. We were coming down onto the runway, and he gunned it, and we had to go back into the pattern for a second. And then
hmm.
last night we were supposed to be home around 9 p.m. We didn't get home until 11. There was a delay at the airport in Chicago, which we don't know what that was. It was supposed to be a much longer delay, so they cut it down quite a bit. And then it was such a little delay out of Chicago that they were able to get us into Nashville on time, or actually a little bit early, so it wasn't a big deal. But then there was a
Wow.
thunderstorm sitting right over the airport in Nashville, so we spent about 45 minutes just circling outside of
Oh.
Nashville waiting for that storm to clear. It was
The joy of
Oh
air
yeah.
travel.
Oh yeah, but it was beautiful. I couldn't get my daughter to break away from either the iPad that she was playing or sleeping to watch outside the window because it was an incredible light show.
Cool.
I was mesmerized. It was the only time I wish I was sitting in the window seat so I could watching all the lightning
Yeah,
flash everywhere. It was
and
cool.
camera taking
Yeah.
pictures to post.
Yep. Yep. But of
Damn.
course she was playing on my phone, so it was kind of tough.
Yes, understood.
So
That is awesome.
anywho,
Okay, that's a perfect segue into axe throwing.
lightning.
Nah, I don't know. I was
Well,
just
no, it
making
is
fun.
because
That
so
true.
Thor, if we want to be really nerdy, Thor in the last Avengers movie lost his hammer, so he got an axe, and he is the god of thunder and lightning. So now thunder, lightning, axe throwing. Boom, got you there, John.
Well done. Yeah, you did. I surrender to your expertise.
I'm gonna get
Well,
so many
that's
comments about that whole
I'm
little
sure you are.
yeah.
I'm sure you are,
Oh,
and you
one more
deserve
thing on
every
the
one of
airplane.
them.
You'll dig this. We got potty dusted majorly, like to the
Oh,
point where everyone was almost throwing up in their mouth because it was so bad. And
oh
we
no.
can't figure out if someone just let one rip that was so bad, or if someone was actually
Oh,
changing their kid's diaper on the airplane. That's
oh
how bad it was.
no.
Even Peyton looked at me and said, "What? What was
What
that? That's the worst thing I've ever smelled in my entire life." And then
Why? Why? Why?
I don't know. But then someone after that thought it was a good idea to take off their shoes. So after that, all
Oh
that stench started to clear. All I was
no.
smelling was someone's hot, sweaty feet the entire night. I know it was the guy
Come
behind me
on.
who fell asleep, who sounded like he needed a CPAP machine. It was bad. It was
It's
bad.
not a long flight from Chicago to
It's
Nashville.
not. And I was like, really, guys, really? I don't want to smell your
Oh.
feet. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry. Axe throwing, thunder,
No,
lightning.
there is. Forget it. That's we. When we have a chance to talk about potty dusting, we need to just forego everything
I
else.
was thinking about you the whole time, and I was wishing I had my phone because it was a Wi-Fi flight, so I could text. And I wanted to text you. Someone just potty dusted on the flight.
I can't. Excuse me. Now I'm coughing. Not because I'm thinking about it and it makes me cough because it's so disgusting.
Oh, it was bad. I mean, I seriously, after it lingered for so long, I stopped thinking, oh, someone just potty dusted me to, oh my God, who just shit in their pants? Because it was bad. It was just, it lingered. It lingered for a really long time. I thought someone
Well,
needed to go
do
check
you
their pants
know
and maybe change their
why?
pants.
It's a pressurized tube. Of
Yes.
course it lingered. It's
Yeah.
not like you cracked the window. I
Right.
mean,
True.
you might as well say, hey, folks, if you would breathe a little deeper, it might go away faster.
Right. No, I had my face. I was almost sucking on the air vent. It was
Oh my
bad.
gosh. Well, and that's the problem too, that if somebody does that, my first inclination is to go right to the air vent. But then I'm thinking, well, people probably think it's me, except the person who actually did it. So,
Yeah,
I mean, there's no
exactly.
safe way to do that.
Right.
Or pretend you don't smell it. I mean, seriously?
Well, you have to because you don't
Everybody's
want to be
the
rude because
pilot smells this.
the
We're in
pilot
row
had to smell this.
28. I'm sure the pilot smells it.
Maybe it was all the people in first class were doing the potty dusting at the same time, so it would just kind of
Oh
float
my
backwards.
gosh.
Oh, it was
Okay, and
bad.
the other bad thing, we're never going to get to access.
No, we're
The
not.
other bad thing is lately I've been, because I still don't have status, and we talked about this, but I had took 6 months off from work
Right.
for my health issues, and because of that, I didn't fly for 6 months essentially,
Okay.
and so I don't have status on the airline, and not that it's bad. I'm building it back up again slowly.
Sure. Have you,
But
before you go on, have you
yeah,
connected your Marriott to, do you fly United?
I don't.
Oh,
I
there's
fly
your,
Delta.
there you go. There's your mistake. You can connect your
It's
Marriott
not a
to,
mistake if you've ever flown United.
we flew
It's
United
not
and
a
I was
mistake.
actually
Yeah.
surprised, but
Yeah,
I
well, you
connected my
will be
Marriott.
surprised no matter what.
Right. I connected my Marriott to the United stuff and it gave me a bump in my status.
Yeah, you know what it would do for me? It would give me one extra point or something because I don't fly United. And it's not to say United's bad because I'm going to fly them I think in November. And it, because it just happened that I need to be out of Chicago and that's
Sure.
one of their hubs.
Well, before you do that, connect the accounts so you can get a
Yeah.
bump in your status.
I will, and that's a really good idea. And it'll be great because then my wife will be back in some crappy seat, and I'll be up in first class.
Nice, nice. That's your potty tip of the day.
That. She really loves that.
I bet
Thank
she
you for the
does.
potty tip. Yeah, it's so I have been mostly flying now, and happily I can get exit seats, and the exit row seats are fine with me. I love the leg room, and I don't mind, getting off the plane on row 27 as opposed to row 6, where you're right behind first class. The problem is lately on some of the what are the planes? I can't even, the 717s or 737s. I have been back in the exit row right by the rear lavatory.
Nice.
Oh, it's nice at first because, oh, look how close to the bathroom. That's great. Except about an hour into the flights, in many cases, or 2 hours into the flight, people are burning a path back and forth to the lavatory. And then I tend to look and say, oh, look, every time they open the door, I'm right next to the lavatory. And it's just as you would imagine. Sometimes, I mean, morning flights, which I usually take, it seems like.
People have their coffee and
exactly. And you do not want to be anywhere near the restroom unless it's you that has to go. And then you don't ever want to follow anybody because holy bazookas, it's just not a good thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
okay.
Our first flight to Chicago we were back by the bathrooms. It wasn't too bad because again, it's a short flight, so it wasn't horrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing I will say that on a 45-minute flight, you shouldn't have to use the lavatory.
Right.
This goes back to you need to go before you leave.
Right. Exactly.
I'm seriously on a 3-hour flight, even a 2-hour flight. Sure, of course, that's fine. But
see, I dehydrate myself so much I don't have to use the bathroom. It's a big deal if I actually have to go and use it. So I like flights from here to Seattle. No, I don't want to do it, but I know I have to at some point. But I will. I feel sick by the time I get there because I have dehydrated myself so much.
I am usually able, and it's not a big deal because I usually am in the aisle when I fly. So it's not like I have to bother people if I want to get up and go. It's just I don't. I don't like going. It's just they're too small, especially the new 737s.
Oh yeah.
Is it the 900 series? I can barely even grab my butt
Right.
standing in the men's room or the
Right.
lavatory. It's so tiny.
And
And
granted,
so,
you and I are not small guys, and I'm not talking like we're not fat by any means. We're not overweight, but we are
well,
tall
I'm
and
chunky. I am chunky for
well,
sure. But
you
you
we
are not overweight. No, you're a very svelte young man. I could lose weight, but I'd have to go on the decapitation diet.
well, and your head keeps getting bigger and bigger. I've noticed.
That's because you say nice things about
Only behind your back. Anyway, go on.
me. No, it's just you were saying that it's tiny, and even though you and I are very tiny men, okay, we're not. We're
No, we're
large
not.
behemoths, but it's tough to fit in those lavatories.
It is. And that's part of the
It's
reason I don't
ridiculous.
like it. And then, of course, if it's usually in the back of the airplane, and what is I don't know why they put them in the back of the airplane. I like the ones in the front because you don't move around as much. But the ones in the
Yeah.
back of the airplane are by the tail. The tail moves, guys. It's not steady through the air, so you're constantly kind of moving back and forth. To be
when
able to
you're
go, you either have to sit
when you're
down or
doing
you have
your business.
exactly. You either have to sit down and do your business or you've got to put your head against the wall to or one hand if you're not very good at one-handed. It's you've got to hold yourself up while you go, and that's hard. It's hard to do,
One
especially when you don't have that much room.
one-handed. Are we talking about the same thing here?
I'm talking about putting one hand on the wall to hold you up, John. I don't know
To
what you're
steady
talking about.
yourself.
Well,
I see.
I kind of
Okay.
know what you're talking about, but wow.
But that is problematic, and it all depends on the design of the plane. But
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. It does. It moves around a little bit, and it truly can get a little bit ripe from
it
time to
can.
time in
Yeah,
there. And
and but
you
if you
get
really
somebody who,
go ahead,
yeah.
I was going to say
Well,
if you
you
really
get
think
somebody
about
who
it, though.
goes. This is both of us going ahead at the same time. Okay, you're younger.
Okay.
Go.
Well, mine is just quick. I think the reason they do make the bathrooms so small is for that exact same reason. Because if you had a huge bathroom where you could move around, if you actually hit a bump or something, you'd go flying across the room rather than just flying a couple of inches back.
Oh, shut up. They're just doing that for, oh, we're making it small for your safety.
I'm making
That's
that up. I don't know if that's
crap.
any. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same reason they want to have the seats so you have absolutely no knee room. Oh, we're
Right.
doing that for your safety so you don't go flying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's not really. And that's the other interesting thing about seatbelts. The seatbelts aren't there. I mean, they may help keep you situated in the case of some turbulence or whatever, but they're not going to save you in a crash.
No,
They're
not at all. No,
they're
that's exactly what they're there for. They're for turbulence, and airlines will tell you that.
yeah,
They're not
and that's
saying
why there aren't shoulder belts and
exactly.
things like that. They will not in an accident in a crash. Uh, yeah, the only good thing about them is they will prevent you from hitting other people.
Yep.
That's kind of how it works. Anyway, okay, we've talked that through. Now, axe throwing.
Axe throwing. I wear
Dun
Axe
dun
body spray. No, I really
dun.
don't.
You should
I should.
not
I'm
ever
stinky.
do that.
No.
You are so. Let me just explain to our awesome audience what you uh, did. That it was just a really cool thing when we were in Nashville and we did our podcast from the hotel, my hotel room, of course, because for some reason Nick likes to join me in my hotel room
Only when there's money on the
uh,
bed.
when there's money on the bed.
And that's
And
the 21C Hotel and Museum in Nashville, Tennessee.
well done, thank you, that. And they are
They're
not
not
a
a
sponsor.
sponsor.
Yeah.
Right?
Um, when we got out of there and we thought, hey, we have axe throwing tonight. That was one of the team events that we had for our work team. I've never thrown an axe. Nick, had you thrown an axe before?
Never.
I, I've thrown darts, and I'm sure we've all done that. But so Nick and I got on YouTube and watched some guy giving instruction on how to throw axes. And so we went to this place, and I'm thinking, well, at least we've got some insight as to what to expect, and we knew how to line up our feet and everything. Nick proceeded to go out, and there were several people. Let me just preface it by saying there were several people who were throwing, and some very fit, big people, large, strong people that could not get the axe to stick in the wood. And Nick, on his first throw, as far as I can recall, not only got it to stick, but got it near the bullseye, and proceeded to get better as we went. And I know you demurred when we talked about this, but you actually were one of the best throwers that was at the entire event.
Well, you just cut out, John. So that's God's way of saying it's not true. Um,
I didn't cut out. I'm sure you just edited it out.
no, you actually did cut out.
Okay.
So if you
Well,
want
that
to say it
happens
all
sometimes.
over again, I mean, by all means. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You're fine.
No, I'm not going to. No, to end it, and probably where I got cut out was saying that you did remarkably well and were one of the best throwers there, despite the fact that A, we had never done it before, and B, we learned on YouTube.
Right. YouTube is a wonderful tool for that sort of thing. But thank you very much, John. And I know you didn't hit your first one, but right after you got that, you started hitting them all as well. So John did a very good job as well. My biggest problem, and you had said that I got better. I think I got worse as the time went on, just because it's physical, and I started hurting.
Well, if you only hit your if you wouldn't hit yourself with the axes, it doesn't hurt as much.
Well, that was part of my routine. You've got to tap the axe on the leg 4 times.
Yeah,
You've got
look
to
at me
rock
on
back.
4, and then you started bleeding, and don't put the
I
sharp
was
part on your leg.
those axes were remarkably sharp.
They were sharp, and they were actually large. There were some.
They were
They had
large.
smaller ones too, but I
Yep.
stuck with the big ones.
I did. Well, did you try the smaller ones at all?
I did not. I didn't even try them.
Yeah. And your technique, the one that you stuck with after
Yep,
trying a couple of them, was the one-handed throw.
correct.
Whereas I did the two-handed throw. I tried the one-handed, and I didn't feel like I had as much control over the axe.
Yeah.
But you
The
had a lot more control and did very well once you moved to that one-handed
I
throw.
felt pretty good with the one-handed. I just had to remember to let the momentum of the whole wind up and pitch, so to speak, work. You can't. What happened? A lot of the people that couldn't get them to stick, they were overthrowing. They were throwing too
Yeah.
hard, and I think you got to let the momentum of your wind up really carry you through.
And that's the one thing, probably the only thing I took from the video when we watched it was he was talking about momentum. He said, when you start, if you have the axe down at your, let's say the sharp part pointing at your knee,
Yep.
if you start and you wind up like golf, you wind up and you go and you throw, you don't stop anywhere in between. It's one swift motion and you do the entire range of motion
Right.
and do it. And that's what will help you get that flick at the end that allows the axe to go through the air and then hit the target and stick.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's what I did every
You did
single time.
remarkably well.
Well, you did as well. Thank you very much.
Well, and we were on the same team.
We were on the
And
same team, and then our boss, my former boss, your current boss,
yep.
beat us in the championship round.
But we
and,
came
and
in
it was
second. Our
head-to-head
team
with
was
me.
second.
Yep, first losers.
We, we were the first losers. That is correct. And my boss, Dennis's technique, and we alluded to this before, was also unique in that he used two hands, but he threw it really lightly, didn't you think?
Yes, yes.
And so, but he also had very good success. Obviously,
He did. He
since
was
they beat
at
us.
the end of the night. He was still able to hit the targets where he was aiming, and I was really hurting, so I had difficulty hitting my target. I was still getting it to stick. It just wasn't sticking where I needed it to go.
Well, and our coworker Candace also kind of hurt herself
She
too. I
did,
think.
and she was kind of our pinch hitter. and she bailed
Yeah,
on us
yeah.
before the championship. So I'm going to blame it all on Candace. Why
Well,
didn't I
it
think
was
about this
definitely her
before?
fault.
Candace, it's all your fault. She does listen, so I know she's listening right now. We still love you, but it's all your fault.
But she got hurt, so it's not
She did.
really
It's
her
not her
fault.
fault.
So
No,
I
not
think
at all.
she wrenched her back or something. And just if you're not familiar with the actual axes, what would you say the big ones weigh if you had to guess, Nick?
5 pounds, 4
Seven
or 5
pounds?
pounds, 4 or
That's it. How
5 pounds,
about the small ones?
2 or 3 pounds, 3 or 4 pounds, something like that. They were not heavy. They were very,
Well,
very narrow, very thin.
heavy is not really. I mean, it's a relative term, but if you're used to throwing darts, they're freaking heavy.
True.
You
Very
know,
true.
so and it's kind of the same. It's the same idea. Uh, you're trying to get something that you're propelling forward to stick in the board, and yeah, I don't know. And she was going with both hands, and I think
Right.
I don't know. I think that being a one-handed thrower, I think that was probably. Um, I don't know. Maybe they could have had a little more instruction about that, but that's too bad. And she was using the big ones too. I didn't even
She
know the
was.
little ones existed
No, because they
until
didn't have any at
later.
our station that we started with.
Right, right. So anyway, if you have not done that axe throwing, you really should try it. It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. And of course, they had terrific food there for us because it was a team event. So they kind of had the whole thing catered,
They really did.
and
They
that
had
was
those little
nice.
sliders. They were so good. Oh, and the ice cream cookies.
That was naughty good.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
very, very good.
yeah. I rubbed some of that on my chest for later.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was worth it. Very much
It,
worth it.
it's sure chilly and sticky, but worth it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. In fact, that's what they were calling us at the end of the night: chilly and sticky.
And to be another a little bit of I guess useless knowledge. That room that we were in, and I don't know if it was that floor, but that particular building we were in, it's the right now it's the Nashville Athletic Club, where we did the axe throwing, and they have a bunch of other games and bars and things like that. It's right on Broadway, downtown Nashville.
Yeah, it was
They
cool.
used to have a fantastic dueling piano bar there. I don't know what
Really?
happened to it. It was always packed. The great musicians, and my wife and I, before we got, I guess it was right after we moved here, a little bit before and after we got married, we used to go there we went there a couple of times. It was phenomenal, and it was really disappointing, and I was kind of upset when we went to the axe throwing place because they took it out of there, and I mean it's gone.
Well,
It's
I
absolutely
would
gone. But
imagine that it would be tough to coexist with a couple of baby grand pianos and people
right
throwing axes. I'm sure they
at the
axed the
baby
hell out
grand
of the
piano,
pianos.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think they
they probably chopped them.
axed the act.
Yeah,
Um,
I bet they chopped them all up.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, the
Anyway,
firewood.
the whole experience though made me feel a lot better about what they had up there, and I would highly recommend if you ever get a chance to get down there, go have a couple of cocktails and throw some axes. Um,
Wow, there's the good advice.
yeah. But to bring this full circle while we wrap it up, the show that I was talking about, where I was introduced to axe throwing, which I didn't know it was a thing until I started seeing them pop up in other parts of the country. But are you familiar with Christine Baranski?
Yes, you know what? I know the name, and when you said it, I'm sure I could pick her
She
out
was in
if you gave me.
Chicago. She's been in, yeah, she played Sheldon's, not Sheldon's mom, Leonard's mom in The Big Bang Theory.
Ah, yes. Now I know
She's
exactly
been,
who you're talking
yeah,
about. Yeah.
she was in the Who, not the Who's. She was a Who in Whoville,
Oh,
in
yes, right.
Ron
And
Howard's,
the
uh,
Jim Carrey one
yep,
of the
the
Grinch.
Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Yeah.
But she was also in The Good Wife, and they have a spin-off series from The Good Wife called The Good Fight. Very, if you are politically charged in any way, which you know John and I really aren't politically charged, we just enjoy life. It's a very politically charged show, so I'm just going to throw that
Wow.
disclaimer out there.
We just
And
enjoy life.
we just enjoy life. But it's a
Okay.
very politically charged show, so if you don't like a lot of politics, I'd stay away from it. But it is a fun show, and one of the things she does in the show to blow off steam is axe throwing. So
Huh.
she actually has her own axes that she carries in a box, and she goes and she does it. Yeah, it was really interesting. So that was my
I
introduction, watching that
That's
show to axe
awesome.
throwing.
I used to travel with my own pool cue, so I
Did you
guess
really?
axes would be the other thing. I
Mental
did.
note: don't play
Yeah.
John. Don't play John in a pool game.
Well, today is not. I used to play more when I was in college, probably than ever
It's like
before. But
riding
I
a
have
bike,
a.
I'm sure.
It's not like riding a bike, no. Well, it hurts less if you fall over at the pool table,
True.
but
Well, it
um,
depends on why you fell over the pool table.
that's true. If you're yes, it could be windy in there. You never know.
Exactly.
But I have a pool table at home, and I still don't play nearly enough to
Yeah.
become good at it again. I used to be, and in fact,
Whoa.
what?
You must have rubbed up against a microphone or something, because we just got our whoosh, whoosh.
Wow, that was my whip sound effect. You haven't heard that?
No.
Oh,
Did you whip
actually,
it? Did you whip
no.
it real good?
It sounded like you just did a whip, and that was beautiful.
I did a whip and I did a nay nay.
Okay, stop that right now. I played pool. Here's a little bit of trivia. I played pool with a gentleman by the name of Willie Mosconi. You ever heard of
I
him?
know that name. Yes.
He was a world famous uh, pool player, billiards shark, you could almost say, but not as flashy or showy as Minnesota Fats. Remember him
Yeah, the names.
from
I don't know
Minnesota?
them, but the names sound familiar.
Yeah, well, Mosconi was an older Italian gentleman and very just a cool guy, but he was probably in his 70s when I saw him play in Madison, Wisconsin, at a place called Cunique Billiards. Guy was amazing, but he had these little frail hands, and I shook hands with him, and he goes, "Hey, fella, that's how I make my living." So I'm trying not to squeeze his hand too hard. But a cool guy, and man, the dude could shoot pool. That's for sure. Anyway, yeah, that's my little brush with fame.
That's a pretty cool brush with fame right there.
I think so too. And he actually, I'm sure he told the story about how he ran into me
Oh, I'm
to his
sure.
family and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, I bet.
the future host of PoddiMouths.
I'm sure he's got this whole potty mouse thing in mind. I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah, that's all it
So
goes.
our brush with fame this when we were in Chicago this week was in the Field Museum. If you can actually go to an Egyptian um, pyramid display
Yeah,
or section of, and there was a mask of one of the pharaohs they had on the wall, and it was Michael Jackson.
really.
Yep. Post all the work, but it looked just like him. I'll post a picture. I'll have my wife send it to
Huh.
me. It's uncanny. You looked at it and
Huh.
go, "Holy crap, that's Mike." So that was our brush with fame.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not realize that he was an Egyptian king
Yeah.
or
I,
pharaoh.
there's that's a whole other conversation we could go.
Probably.
That's a topic in and of itself. So
Gosh.
anyway, I mentioned that I will post that photo along with some more photos from our trip eventually. You can find
Awesome.
all of that on our Instagram accounts, both Eat, Drink, Road, because we were traveling, and I do have some other tips. As long, John, you need to send me some more of these tips too, so we can start posting more on that account. But I'll also post some of our pictures on the PoddiMouths Instagram account. You can find that at PoddiMouths. The Eat Drink Road is eat.drink.road on Instagram. You can also find a lot of this information on our Facebook page at PoddiMouths, our Twitter account at Mouths Poddy. No, you usually back me up on that
It always makes me laugh.
one.
And don't
and
forget Mouse Body.
and if you want to help us fund some of the trips that we talked about the Potty Pod last week with Bill Taylor,
That was
which was a
fun.
fantastic episode. I remember, by the way, speaking of that, I remember the intro that I had planned, John.
Well,
My wife
finally, it's about
tried
time.
to. So we had mentioned, and she didn't know this because she doesn't listen to the podcast, and I was editing that exact
What?
podcast. But in the last podcast, we mentioned how my wife makes fun of me when I'm sitting on the couch next to her editing the podcast because I'm just giggling and smiling the whole time.
Yes.
Well, I actually was editing partially edited on the airplane on the way to Chicago, and partially edited in our hotel room in Chicago one of the nights after we put our daughter down because there was nothing else to do.
Wow.
But
I'm going
I
to
was
leave that
sitting
alone.
there. I was sitting there the whole time, and my wife, she snapped a picture of me. It didn't turn out well, so we're gonna try to maybe recreate it. But she snapped a picture of me editing and giggling, and I wanted to post that. So I wanted to talk about that, the fact that we talked about it in the last episode, and my wife tried to capture me doing it so I could post it this time, and I hadn't told her about it. So that was really kind of fun. But anyway, if you want us to be able to carry on with what we're doing, or if you want to help us get that potty pod and travel around and give more tips on Eat Drink Road, or talk to a few more people around the country, why don't you head over to Patreon and see if you can hit us up there and support us. Or once we actually get our act together and start doing some advertising on um, YouTube, maybe we can support ourselves that way too, right, John?
We could potentially. And we may even
Potentially.
shoot live some live stuff so we can post it live on YouTube. So
Yeah,
actual
some live
camera
PoddiMouths
stuff.
podcast. Actual cameras. We
Yeah,
have cameras. We do have cameras. We just never
I
use them.
know. Well, it's kind of overkill.
It is. It is. Well, John, thank you for letting me vent today. That was a lot of fun. We
Dude,
had
you
a
were
lot of
great.
fun.
You laid it out at the beginning. Boom.
I did.
Threw
Yeah.
down.
Boom. And
I
if
want to
that
see that
person is
bicycle guy. We're going to
if
kick his ass.
exactly, if he's a fan, I hope he's not anymore because I just totally called him out. I wish I knew his name, but you're an asshole and I hate you. But John, I love you and I love all of our listeners.
Oh, let me speak for the listeners for a moment. We love you too, Nick.
All right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, John.
Sir, you do the same. This is coming out on Tuesday. Hope everybody listens. And, well, you are listening if you're hearing me say that. That was kind of stupid. So
They had to listen to the very end to get it, though.
I know. They're going, that was really stupid. And we'll see you and talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.